Before we start, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Maybe you're carrying anger about something that happened years ago. Maybe someone close to you betrayed your trust, and you're still feeling that pain. Maybe you're struggling to forgive yourself for mistakes you've made. Maybe you've heard that you should forgive, but you don't understand why or how. This conversation is for you. I want to talk about forgiveness today. Not because I'm perfect at it, I'm not. Not because it comes easily to me, it doesn't. But because I've learned something about forgiveness that I wish someone had told me 20 years ago, something that might save you from carrying burdens that are stealing your peace and your energy. Most people think forgiveness is about being nice to people who hurt you. That's not what forgiveness is. Most people think forgiveness means forgetting what happened or pretending it doesn't matter. That's not what forgiveness is either. Today I'm going to tell you what forgiveness actually means, why it's one of the hardest things any human being can do, and why it might be the most important skill you ever develop. Not for other people's sake, but for your own. Because here's what I've learned. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The person who hurt you might be sleeping peacefully while you're lying awake at night, replaying what they did. They might have moved on with their life while you're stuck in the past, rehearsing conversations you'll never have. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. It's about your freedom, your peace, your ability to move forward with your life. Let me tell you about a betrayal that I carried for years. Someone I trusted completely, someone I considered a close friend, made decisions behind my back that cost me not just money, but credibility, relationships, and years of work. They had their reasons. They thought they were doing what was best, but they never asked me. They never gave me a chance to respond. They just acted, and I found out after the damage was done. For a long time, I was angry, not just disappointed, angry. I would replay conversations in my head, imagining what I should have said. I would think about all the ways they had wronged me, all the opportunities I had given them, all the trust I had placed in them. I would construct elaborate fantasies about confronting them, about making them understand how much they had hurt me. This anger felt justified. It felt righteous. After all, I was the wronged party. I had been betrayed by someone I trusted. Didn't I have a right to be angry? Yes, I did. But having the right to be angry and choosing to stay angry are two different things. The anger was eating me alive. Not because it was wrong to feel it initially, but because I was feeding it every day. I was rehearsing the offense over and over, keeping it fresh, keeping it alive. I was letting someone who had already taken so much from me continue to take my peace, my energy, my ability to think clearly about other things. I realized that my anger was hurting me more than it was hurting them. They had moved on with their life. They probably rarely thought about what had happened. But I was thinking about it every day, multiple times a day. I was giving them free rent in my head, and they didn't even know they were living there. That's when I started to understand what forgiveness really is. Before I tell you what forgiveness is, let me tell you what it's not, because I think a lot of people avoid forgiveness because they misunderstand what it means. Forgiveness is not forgetting. You don't have to pretend that the thing that hurt you never happened. You don't have to erase it from your memory or act like it doesn't matter. Some things should be remembered not to nurse grudges, but to learn lessons and protect yourself from similar situations in the future. That forgiveness is not excusing. You don't have to say that what the person did was okay or understandable or justified. Wrong is still wrong, even after you forgive it. Forgiveness doesn't change the facts of what happened. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. You can forgive someone without trusting them again. You can forgive someone without having a relationship with them. You can forgive someone without even telling them you've forgiven them. Forgiveness is an internal process that doesn't require the other person's participation. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's not letting people walk all over you or being a doormat. It's not saying that you're okay with being treated badly. You can forgive someone and still set boundaries. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself from future harm. Forgiveness is not immediate. It's not a switch you flip or a decision you make once and then it's done. For big hurts, forgiveness is usually a process that takes time. You might have to choose to forgive the same offense multiple times as different aspects of it surface in your memory and emotions. So if forgiveness isn't any of those things, what is it? Forgiveness is the decision to stop using someone's past mistakes as weapons against them in your mind. It's choosing to release your right to revenge, your right to punishment, your right to keep score. It's saying, what you did was wrong and it hurt me, but I'm not going to carry this anymore. I'm not going to let what you did continue to control my thoughts, my emotions, my peace. Forgiveness is fundamentally about your freedom, not their absolution. Think about it this way. When you hold on to anger and resentment, you're essentially letting the person who hurt you continue to hurt you every day. Every time you replay the offense in your mind, every time you feel that surge of anger, every time you imagine what you would say to them if you had the chance, they're hurting you again, even if they're not even aware you exist. Forgiveness is saying, I'm not going to let you hurt me anymore. What you did was wrong, but I'm taking back my power. I'm choosing peace over revenge, freedom over resentment. But here's the thing that makes forgiveness so difficult. It feels like you're letting them off the hook. It feels like you're saying what they did was okay, even though that's not what you're saying at all. Forgiveness goes against our natural instincts in several ways. It feels unfair. Our sense of justice says that people who do wrong should face consequences. When we forgive, it can feel like we're letting them escape the punishment they deserve. But here's the reality. Your anger is not punishing them, it's punishing you. Withholding forgiveness doesn't create justice. It creates more suffering, and most of that suffering is yours. It requires us to give up control. When we're angry, we feel like we're doing something about the situation. We're holding the person accountable in our minds. We're making sure they don't get away with what they did. Forgiveness requires us to accept that we can't control other people. We can't force them to acknowledge our pain, and we can't make them into different people than they are. It asks us to absorb pain instead of passing it on. Our natural instinct, when we're hurt, is to hurt back. Forgiveness means choosing to absorb the pain and stop the cycle, rather than finding ways to make the other person suffer too. This goes against everything our emotions tell us to do when we're wounded. It requires us to release the story we tell ourselves. Often, our anger is tied up with a narrative about who we are and who they are. We're the victim, they're the villain. We're good, they're bad. We're right, they're wrong. Forgiveness requires us to hold a more complex view where both people are flawed human beings who make mistakes. For me, forgiveness has been a process, not an event. Here's what that process has looked like. First, acknowledging the hurt. I had to stop pretending that what happened didn't matter or that I was fine. I had to admit, at least to myself, that I was hurt, that I was angry, and that these feelings were affecting my life. Second, understanding the cost of unforgiveness. I had to honestly assess what carrying this anger was costing me. How much mental energy was I spending on it? How was it affecting my relationships with other people? How was it impacting my ability to focus on positive things in my life? Third, choosing to let go. This is the hardest part. It's the actual decision to release the right to revenge, to stop rehearsing the offense, to stop trying to make the other person pay for what they did. For me, this often requires prayer or meditation, some way of consciously releasing the burden I've been carrying. Fourth, redirecting my energy. Once I've made the decision to forgive, I have to find positive ways to use the mental and emotional energy that was previously devoted to anger. This might mean focusing on my work, my relationships, my goals, or my personal growth. Fifth, reinforcing the decision. Like I said, forgiveness often isn't a one-time event. When memories of the offense surface, when I feel anger rising again, I have to remind myself that I've already chosen to forgive. I have to consciously redirect my thoughts towards something more productive. The most surprising thing about forgiveness is how much it benefits the person doing the forgiving. When I finally let go of that long-held anger, it was like setting down a heavy backpack. I didn't realize I was carrying. I had more energy for positive things. I could think more clearly. I slept better. I was more present in my relationships. But beyond the personal benefits, forgiveness taught me something important about human nature. Everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. Everyone has reasons for the behavior that made sense to them at the time, even if those reasons seem incomprehensible to us. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it helps explain it. And understanding, even if we don't agree, can be the beginning of forgiveness. The person who betrayed my trust wasn't evil. They weren't sitting around plotting how to hurt me. They were making decisions based on their own fears, their own understanding of the situation, their own priorities. Those decisions hurt me, but they weren't necessarily intended to hurt me. Recognizing this doesn't make what they did right, but it makes them human. And it's easier to forgive human mistakes than it is to forgive deliberate evil. One thing I haven't talked about yet is self-forgiveness, which might be even harder than forgiving others. We all carry regrets, things we did that hurt people we care about, opportunities we missed because we were afraid or unprepared, words we said in anger that we wish we could take back, decisions we made that seemed right at the time but turned out to be wrong. The tendency is to replay these mistakes over and over, to punish ourselves with guilt and shame, to tell ourselves that we should have known better, should have been better, should have done better. But self-forgiveness follows the same principles as forgiving others. It's not about excusing your mistakes or pretending they don't matter. It's about learning from them and then choosing to move forward, rather than staying stuck in the past. I've made mistakes that hurt people I love. I've made business decisions that cost people their jobs. I've said things I regret and done things I wish I could undo. For years, I carried guilt about these mistakes, replaying them in my mind, wondering how things might have been different if I had made better choices. But I've learned that self-condemnation doesn't help anyone. It doesn't undo the past. It doesn't help the people who were hurt, and it doesn't make me a better person in the future. If anything, it makes me less capable of making good decisions going forward because I'm operating from a place of guilt and fear rather than wisdom and confidence. Self-forgiveness means acknowledging that you're human, that humans make mistakes, and that the best thing you can do with past mistakes is learn from them and do better in the future. I think forgiveness is fundamentally a spiritual act, whether you're religious or not. It requires us to act against our natural instincts, to choose love over hate, peace over conflict, hope over despair. Every major religious tradition emphasizes the importance of forgiveness. Christianity teaches that we should forgive others as we've been forgiven by God. Buddhism teaches that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent to throw it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. Islam teaches that forgiveness is closer to righteousness. Judaism teaches that forgiveness is a sign of strength, not weakness. But even if you're not religious, forgiveness connects you to something larger than your immediate emotions and reactions. It connects you to the possibility of healing, growth, and transformation. It connects you to your highest self rather than your wounded self. When I forgive someone, I'm not just making a practical decision about how to use my mental energy. I'm making a statement about what kind of person I want to be and what kind of world I want to live in. I'm saying that love is stronger than hate, that healing is possible, that people can change, that hope is reasonable. One of the most beautiful things about forgiveness is how it affects other relationships. When you learn to forgive, you become more forgiving in general. You become quicker to give people the benefit of the doubt, slower to take offense, more willing to work through conflicts rather than writing people off. This makes all your relationships better. Your friends, your family, your colleagues, they all benefit when you become someone who can forgive and move forward, rather than someone who holds grudges and keeps score. Children especially benefit from being around forgiving people. They learn that mistakes don't define you, that relationships can survive conflict, that love is stronger than anger. They learn that it's possible to be hurt and still choose healing, to be wronged and still choose peace. I want to be clear about something. Some hurts are bigger than others, and some situations make forgiveness much more difficult. If you've experienced abuse, if someone has deliberately tried to destroy your life, if you've lost someone you love because of another person's actions, and forgiveness in those situations isn't something you just decide to do one day and then it's done. It's a long, difficult process that might require professional help, spiritual guidance, and a lot of time. Don't let anyone pressure you to forgive before you're ready. Don't let anyone tell you that you're weak or vindictive. If forgiveness doesn't come quickly or easily. Some wounds take time to heal, and that's okay. But even in the most difficult situations, I believe forgiveness is ultimately beneficial for the person who was hurt. Not because it's easy, not because it's quick, and not because the person who caused the hurt deserves it, but because carrying that level of anger and pain indefinitely will destroy your ability to experience joy, peace, and love. If you're struggling to forgive someone, here are some practical steps that have helped me. Start small. Don't try to forgive the biggest hurt first. Practice forgiveness on smaller offenses, the driver who cut you off, the friend who was late, the colleague who took credit for your idea. Build your forgiveness muscles on easier situations. Write a letter you never send. Sometimes it helps to write out everything you want to say to the person who hurt you. Get all your anger and pain on paper. Then, when you're ready, throw the letter away as a symbolic act of releasing those feelings. Practice empathy. Try to understand why the person might have acted the way they did. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it can help you see them as a flawed human being rather than a monster. Focus on your own healing. Instead of waiting for an apology that might never come, focus on what you need to heal and move forward. This might include therapy, spiritual practices, physical exercise, creative expression, or building stronger relationships with people who do treat you well. Remember that forgiveness is a choice you make for yourself. You're not forgiving because the other person deserves it. You're forgiving because you deserve peace. At the end of the day, forgiveness is a choice. You can choose to hold on to anger, resentment, and pain. You have that right. You can choose to replay offenses in your mind, to nurse grudges, to wait for people to get what you think they deserve. But I want you to consider the cost of that choice. What is unforgiveness costing you in terms of your mental energy, your emotional health, your relationships, your ability to be present for the good things in your life? And I want you to consider the alternative. What would your life look like if you could release the anger you're carrying? What would be possible if you could redirect the energy you're spending on resentment towards something positive and constructive? Forgiveness doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you trust people who haven't earned your trust. It doesn't mean you forget important lessons or fail to protect yourself from future harm. It just means you stop letting past hurts control your present happiness. The person who hurt you doesn't have to change for you to be free. They don't have to apologize. They don't have to acknowledge what they did. They don't have to become a better person. Your freedom isn't dependent on their choices. It's dependent on yours. You can choose forgiveness. You can choose peace. You can choose to stop drinking the poison and expecting someone else to die. It won't be easy. It might be one of the hardest things you ever do, but it might also be one of the most important things you ever do. Not for anyone else, but for yourself. Because you deserve to be free. You deserve to live without the weight of anger and resentment dragging you down. You deserve to use your energy for building something beautiful rather than maintaining something bitter. The choice is yours. The freedom is waiting. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe if these conversations help you think differently about healing and moving forward. And remember, forgiveness isn't about being perfect, it's about being free. What burden are you ready to set down today?